Truth Breeze, topic number 3 says, can we understand the history of the MAAFA without KEMET? Now, this is one of those videos that are kind of long, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to play it at 1.25 speed, and hopefully that will help, cutting down on the time a little bit. So we'll watch it, and then we'll comment.
The intersection of ancient Kemet, Kush, and the MAAFA, the African Holocaust, or transatlantic slave trade, holds profound significance in understanding contemporary geopolitics and the African diaspora's identity. Recognizing ancient Kemet, Kush, as the cradle of African civilizations underscores the cultural heritage and ancestral ties that diasporic Africans rightfully embrace. While many scholars traditionally mark the beginning of the MAAFA in the medieval period, Dr. Kwame Nantambu extends its origins to Narmer's unification of ancient Kemet, highlighting its resistance to Eurasian invasions. Despite awareness of enslavement in East Africa by various empires like the Romans, Greeks, and Arabs, scant attention is given to the East African involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. Notably, the enslavement and trafficking of remnant black populations from ancient Kemet and Kush during the collapse of their dynasties. This historical connection sheds light on the enduring impact of colonization, exploitation, and displacement on African peoples across continents, shaping their experiences of oppression and resilience. According to Dr. Musa Lam's documentation in the African Union Factbook, following the Persian invasion of Northeast Africa, many ancient Kemites migrated West and Central Africa. These migrations were driven by factors such as oppression from foreign invaders and a desire to escape their rule. These ancient Kemites' descendants would later become victims of the MAAFA, the transatlantic slave trade, and be trafficked to the Americas. Historical records indicate that with each invasion of ancient Kemet by foreigners, a significant portion of its indigenous black population sought refuge by emigrating to other regions of Africa, particularly south or west of Kemet. This pattern of migration occurred repeatedly, with scholars identifying as many as 6 major migrations westward across the Sahara Desert alone. Professor Abubakar Moussalon, from the Faculty of History and Human Sciences at the University of Cheikh Anta Diop in Dakar, has shed light on these migrations. He has highlighted the work of Yoro Diao, a historian from the late 19th century, who compiled Western Sudanic oral traditions regarding migrations from the Nile Valley. These traditions, spanning from the 7th century BC to the 6th century AD, corroborate the existence of 6 major migrations from the Nile Valley toward the west, across the Sahara Desert. Each of these migrations, as described by Diao, was prompted by external invasions of the Nile Valley or by the oppressive regimes established by foreign rulers. These movements of people not only shaped the demographic landscape of Western Africa, but also underscored the Nile Valley's profound influence on the cultures and societies of the Western Sudan. The first migration might have been a result of the Assyrian invasion of ancient Kemet and the defeat of the Kushite kings of the 25th dynasty in 660 BC. The traditions of the Soninke, Sarakhole, founders of the Ghana Empire, 250-1070 AD, from whose ashes rose the Mali and Songhai empires at different times, assert that their remote founding ancestor was born in the region of Sona or Aswan in Upper Kemet. He brought with him 2 zoomorphic divinities, the serpent and the vulture, the ancient Kemetian symbols of royal dominion over Upper and Lower Kemet. The water-dwelling serpent, Bida, became the national deity of Ouagadougou, capital of the Ghana Empire. Moreover, these traditions speak of a jackal that guided the early migrations and therefore answers to the Kemetian opener of the way, the divine jackal Wepwat, or Anubis. Boubacar Lam situates the departure of the Soninke ancestors from Kemet no later than 486 BC as a result of the exactions of the Persian king Darius, who reigned between 522-486 BC on the inhabitants of the Nile Valley, the foundations of the society and state that would later become the Empire of Ghana would have occurred no later than 460 BC. The Songhai Empire, the last of the 3 early great empires in West Africa, was said to be originally established by Kushite immigrants. They may represent a branch of the Kushites from Kemet that chose to move west after 660 BC. There are 2 Western Sudanic historical manuscripts that survive from the 7th century. One of them describes the migration of the magicians who contended against Moses, Cassidra 1230 BC, westwards into the country of the later Songhai II, found the city of Kukia. This would suggest Songhai Nile Valley origins dating earlier, even than the 25th Kushite dynasty, 750-660 BC. The Lebu of Senegal's Atlantic coast, in and around Dakar, assert that their original homeland was Libya. The word Lebu was the ancient Kemetian name for the land and people west of the Nile, i.e. Libya, and was also a word meaning lion. The Lebu have an interesting ritual called the lion game, in which actors dress and act like lions. There is also a clan of fisher folk among the Pular-speaking people of Guinea, who are called Diba. The clan totem is a hippopotamus. In ancient Kemet, one of the words for hippopotamus was dib. Moreover, the Diba use exactly the same kind of harpoon used by ancient Kemetian fishermen and hippo hunters. In the Kemetian language, Pereye became the term pharaoh. In Wolof and Pearl, the word Fari is a title of the king. The first pharaoh of a united Kemet was known as Mena. The first king of both the Tukolo and the Soninke was Mana, a slight corruption of Nanao, the title the Akan people of modern-day Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire give to their kings. The Akans are said to be blood relatives of the Soninke, Sarakole of the old Ghana Empire, who are now spread over modern Senegal, Gambia, Mali, Mauritania, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Burkina Faso, and Guinea-Bissau. According to Boubacar Lam, the earliest kingdoms of the Western Sudan from about 460 BC were neo-pharaonic kingdoms and would remain so until the beginnings of Islamization of the region with the Almoravid conquest, 1076 AD. Another important stream of the emigration form, ancient Kemet, came down southwards through the Congo forest. From the Congo forest, some went westwards to occupy the near west coast of Africa. Others more migrate from the Congo forest, precisely around the general area of present-day Cameroon and the Gabon, to occupy East Africa and what is today the SADC countries. This was the branch from ancient Kemet that European historians call the Bantus, of the now famous Bantu migration, which took place between 1000 BC to 1500 AD. But originally, they were from the stock of ancient Kemet and Nubia, who migrated to avoid the foreign invaders who attacked their homelands in the Nile Valley. Enslaved Africans from the Happy River Valley were also trafficked along intercontinental trade routes to Western and Central Africa before being sold to colonial plantations in the Americas. From the end of the 17th century, Africans arrived in France in significant numbers, and during the 18th, royal policy permitted French slave owners in the Americas to bring their slaves to France. Tous ces blacks became a more common sight in France. Mukhachles has been published about the African presence in other parts of Europe. However, a number of Africans, especially Ethiopian envoys and pilgrims, visited Europe during the late Middle Ages. And by the 15th century, Ethiopian monks and other Africans, including some slaves, were living in Venice, the Vatican, and neighboring cities. Venetians were slave traders and slave owners too. Although most slaves seem to have been of European and Asian origin, some were Africans. Indeed, the trade in African slaves increased after the fall of Constantinople had restricted the Black Sea traffic. Most seem to have been obtained from Kemetian ports, a point which suggests that their origin included the Nile Valley of the Sudan. Documentation is too scanty to generalize about the Africans' lives in Venice and neighboring areas. Some reports assert that they became absorbed into local families, thereby accounting for their virtual disappearance by the late 18th century. Also relevant to their status is the fact that unfree persons were excluded from certain crafts. So African slaves and servants probably suffered this disadvantage. Some observers, however, have noted that slaves were granted the protection of the law. All slaves had to be baptized, and this may have encouraged more lenient conditions. However, slaves were unfree and unequal, and the physical and psychological limitations suffered require more study before final conclusions are reached. Dutch expansion in West Africa developed more or less spontaneously. In 1617, the Dutch were so strong in Senegambia that they were a dominant force in the island of Gorée and had largely eliminated not only the Portuguese but also the English and the French from trade in Joal, Portugal and Rufisque. They held their strong position for over 50 years. At the same time, their ships visited Loango, the Congo, and Angola. Initially, like the English and the French, they were little interested in the slave trade. The turn of the 16th century, however, heralded a new phase of European expansion in Africa in which the slave trade grew in significance to become of the utmost importance to the Dutch as well. This phase began with the purchase of slaves in Elmina, Accra, Arda, Benin, and the Nile Delta, and also Calabar, Gabon, and Cameroon. The slaves were sold in return for sugar to the plantations on St. Thomas Island, then occupied by the Dutch, or were transported to Brazil. In the Eastern slave trade, enslaved Africans were taken from the east coast of Africa, the modern countries of Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, and the island of Madagascar. They also came from the Savannah area, which includes countries such as Mali, Niger, Chad, and Sudan, and the Horn of Africa, which covers Djibouti, Somalia, and Ethiopia. Enslaved Africans from Sudan and southern Egypt were transported to Zanzibar before being smuggled into the Americas. In the mid-19th century, Zanzibar was a hub for illegal slave trade, dominated by slavers from the United States, earning it the moniker of the KEMET of the illegal slave trade, as described by Dr. Gerald Horne. During this time, the United States strategically targeted Lisbon, perceived as one of the weaker major colonial powers, to establish control over the illegal slave trade, with London primarily focused on monitoring slave trade in West Africa. East Africa became an open route for illicit activities. By the 1830s, the United States had established a practical monopoly in the region and fiercely guarded its position. An elongated triangular trade network emerged, connecting East Africa with Brazil and the United States, particularly Salem, Massachusetts. Salem became synonymous with slave trade to the extent that Africans associated the United States with Salem. American nationals would purchase vessels and rent them to Brazilian and Portuguese slave traders in Brazil. These ships, protected by the American flag and manned by American crews, were used for round-trip voyages to Africa. Shipbuilders in eastern ports, including Beverly and Salem, constructed vessels specifically for this Brazil-Africa trade. Zanzibar had a notorious reputation as a major site for the African slave trade. Records indicate that between September 1832 and May 1834, out of 41 vessels arriving in Zanzibar, 32 were American, while the rest were from England, France, and Spain. This trade flourished rapidly, as observed by a Salem merchant writing from Rio de Janeiro, noting the increasing number of vessels departing daily for the African coast to procure slaves. The Ottoman Empire was a major participant in the illegal slave trade and trafficked enslaved Africans to Asia and the Americas. The territory of the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century included the Nile Valley. One of the major purchasers of these Africans were the Portuguese, who smuggled them to Brazil. The hemispheric context of the Confederacy has fortunately received increasing attention by historians in recent years. The rebellion by the slaveholding region of the United States did not occur in isolation, but occurred in the context of a global struggle over slavery. While Britain worked to end the slave trade and slavery worldwide, nations such as Brazil, Spain, Portugal, and the Ottoman Empire benefited from the industry and hoped to maintain slavery, if not the trade itself. Gerald Horne, in The Deepest South, examined the critical importance of Brazil in the minds of Southern politicians as a potential ally and eventual refuge after the end of the American Civil War. Horne argues for a larger role in the historiography for slaveholding Brazil, as well as other parts of the Lusophone world, in our understanding of the context for the Confederacy. Along with Cuba, Brazil was a slave state, but with its immense size and political independence, it held an outsized role in the mentality of Southern politicians before and during the American Civil War. Brazil continued to hold a special place in the minds of slave-owning Southerners as a refuge for some intransigence after the war's end. The ongoing, albeit illegal slave trade coming from Portuguese colonies in Africa and the Ottoman Empire was an additional complicating factor in the history of slavery in the Western Hemisphere. Global British efforts to put a complete end to the slave trade, as well as to slavery itself, consumed a surprising amount of British resources, from Royal Navy contingents patrolling the west coast of Africa to diplomats pressuring foreign governments to adopt significant legislation against the entire industry. Confederate representatives might have used the good offices of Spain to gain recognition from Portugal as well. Portugal was even smaller than Spain, of course, and of less international significance and military potential. Despite this weak position, it was a nation that boasted not only an African empire in Angola, Mozambique, and elsewhere, but an outsized role in the illegal slave trade that continued to the Americas throughout the 19th century. Despite British naval and diplomatic efforts to destroy this commerce in human cargo, some of the slaves transported by the Portuguese came surreptitiously to Brazil or Cuba, while others were purchased within the Ottoman Empire. A traditional ally of Britain, Portugal nonetheless resisted entreaties from London to put a stop to this practice among its merchantmen and shipping companies. Like Belgium, another small nation with outsized territory in Africa, Portugal, nonetheless, could have played a role in a coalition of states, which might have also included Brazil, to buttress the Confederacy. These states, of course, relied upon the toleration of the British Empire, the only power with an effective veto over major operations by these minor countries. Ancient Kemet holds profound importance in understanding the intricacies of the slave trade due to its rich history and pivotal role in African civilization. Scholars like Dr. Kwame Nantambu extend the origins of the transatlantic slave trade to Kemet's ancient resistance to Eurasian invasions, broadening our historical perspective. The migrations of ancient Kemites to West and Central Africa, documented by researchers such as Dr. Musa Alam and Yoro Diao, reveal patterns of movement driven by external pressures and oppressive regimes, reshaping the continent's demographic landscape. Moreover, the intersection of Kemet with the MAAFA underscores the enduring influence of colonization, exploitation, and displacement on African peoples across continents. By recognizing Kemet as the cradle of African civilizations and understanding its connections to the slave trade, we gain deeper insights into the roots of contemporary social and political dynamics within the African diaspora and beyond.
All right, hopefully that was good for you guys. That's a video from Cam Javerse, who's been on the panel before. So make sure you guys head over there, like, share, and subscribe. Make sure to do the same thing here too. Make sure to like the video, share it with your peoples, and subscribe if you haven't already. Um, just trying to figure out if the interface is difficult to navigate with this new interface, but it seems like Jose is fine. I don't know. Anthony seems to be coming up and going off and coming up again. But Shooter Breeze topic 3. Shooter Breeze topic number 3 says, can we understand the history of the MAAFA without Kemet? I'm going to start off with Black Steel on this one. Black Steel, can we? Or something else? Go ahead.
I mean, we have before, right? Many times you think about the MAAFA, you think about the transatlantic slave trade. But I think that this video does a good job of expanding that view, and that you show that all of Africa was affected by this catastrophe. It wasn't just the trade of people across the Atlantic. It was also the trade of, dealing with the Ottoman Empire, with the Portuguese in Brazil, which also going to Europe. So this was a continent wide issue. And also, I'm glad they pushed the date back, going all the way back to Kemet and other issues they had. So it took it back from, because when you're in school, you're teaching, talking about slavery, talking about going back to the discovery of European colonization of the Americas, right? And the need for slave labor there. But this video did a good job illustrating. It goes back even further than that. It goes back to even to the begin, even to you know the old kingdom, really, and how Africa's people, for all our differences, we have many things in common too. So this, to me, a lot of people who tend to say, they joke and say, "Oh, we was kings," or make it seem like black people in America had no connection to Kemet, which is just outright true, outright false, I should say. And I don't understand why it's such a hard thing to grasp, because white people recognize ancient Greece and ancient Rome as the center of their civilization. And these crackers have no connection to Greece or Rome. They was probably some pig farmer in France or someplace. But they can understand that their society, that the golden age of the society initiated there. So with Africans, why is it that when we look towards Kemet as the centerpiece for our culture, we get told that we're delusional, we get told we're hoteps, and I think the video did a very good job of connecting the different cultures and experiences of African people throughout the millennia, and how they dealt with invasions. I like you referenced Dr. Gerald Horn book, The Deepest South. I haven't read that one yet, but I do want to read that. Um, he talks about how the goal of the U.S. Confederacy was to expand steady southward. Like they wanted to buy Cuba from Spain because Cuba was a large island that slaveholders coveted. They wanted to continue to go into South America, Central America, all the islands of the Caribbean, and make a slave empire. And it was only their defeat at the hands of the Union forces that prevented this. But there were some Confederates who actually did migrate, and their descendants live in Brazil to this day. I think they have a parade like every year celebrating their heritage in America. So I really enjoyed the video. I don't mind the length. I thought it was really good and educational. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Black Steel, Trigger Happy in the chat said, this video is good at completely eradicating the idea that the diaspora of the Western Hemisphere are only West and Central Africans. He said people from Sudan, Egypt, and East Africa or Southern Africa were trafficked as well. Let's go to Oni next. Oni, what say you to this?
Yeah, it's a good video. Controversy. Shout out to Controversy. Um, can we understand the history of MAAFA without KEMET? I think he makes a good case for our genetics being more diverse than West Africa, and that's something that I've always said. Although I typically look at the MAAFA as like not from the perspective of what we were at the time, I guess, but more so, as the Europeans coming in and devastating stuff. Now, obviously, we had a intricate history before we were in Western Africa, and obviously, um, white people tend to downgrade or degrade that. But as far but I think, but yeah. So I mean, I could appreciate this sort of content that kind of gives Black people a broader sense of what was Africa like, or what was pre-colonial Africa like, because the impressions that we get from white people about pre-colonial Africa are are very deficient. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I expect white people to lie to us. You know, I expect them to tell us any old story. And right now, I'm working through the Shaka Zulu um, miniseries. I'm trying to watch it with my son, and I'm kind of regretting that I'm watching it with my son. I put it off for a long time watching it because I never seemed to be able to catch it in the beginning or whatever. But it's clearly written by a white man, and it's clearly, has Africa depicted in such a way that you're like, oh yeah, these Africans were silly. You know what I mean? These Africans were, like at one scene, like the second episode. Spoiler alert, right? One scene in the second episode, there's like this woman that the whole village thinks is dead. Okay, they're carrying her quote unquote dead body, and then the white doctor looks over and and he sees her finger twitch, and he's like, "That lady's not dead; she's alive." And like, come on, you really think a whole village is not gonna notice this lady's fingers moving? But it's that kind of like you're not gonna notice that the lady's breathing, right? It's that kind of like that's what these white people want us to believe Africa was. And so thanks to Conjureverse, and other people, but thanks to Conjureverse for um, giving us an impression that no, Africa had it's traditions. It's people coming from one country trying to establish like it's nation building. And that's kind of like what I used to have in my old literature. You know, and of course I have that in my new literature too. But my whole thing is that yeah, we have to. Um, I appreciate this from a standpoint of, if you really think that Black people were just some people who would carry a sleeping person, I guess, or a sick person, and go bury them. live, right? Then yeah, that's this kind of content kind of says, hey, look, that's not what we were, right? And I could appreciate it from that because a lot of black people are under the pressure. Because I don't know why I'm watching the Shaka video at this point, um, but I think a lot of people were watching it when I was younger. So, and it's like to me, it's like, well, why would we be watching this? Honestly, um, but that's pretty much it.
Funny thing about that, not recognizing someone's alive and people thought they were dead. That was a European thing, man. They used to put all kind of bells and stuff in coffins just in case you were alive. You pull the string and the bell will ring, and I forget what term comes from it. Grave watcher, grave keeper, some term comes from it. They just have to sit someone out there just in case you were alive, and that bell rung because they found their ancestors in graves clawing at the inside of the box and all that kind of stuff. It's funny how they would put that on us, you know. Um, there's a couple other comments in the chat I'll get to, but Real Black Gentleman was kind of happy to hear him say Neo Pharaonic. And then he said, yo, he just said the throne went west, basically. Yeah, which book was that Black Steel and I did for the book club? But basically, that was the discussion that, we came out of Kemet and we're kind of on the run throughout West, throughout all directions in Africa for a time there. Cheryl said, let me see. Cheryl said we should use Kemet, Kemetiu, to refer to all African diaspora. So you guys can speak to that too when you have a chance. Uh, she said excellent video. Uh, Anthony, I see your comment. Try again. I'm actually waiting for you to come up and see if I could lock you in up here on the panel. Um, but with that said, let's welcome in Jose to the panel this week. Jose, how are you?
Yes, hello. I'm I'm okay. I'm cool. It's getting really cold in here, but yeah, alive and kicking. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for coming through.
Yeah, the subject. MGverse does a great job with his video. I like what he does. He touches subjects like language, this one was yeah, thorough, I must say. Actually it's confirmed that it's generally confirmed that, for example, Serer that live in Senegal are they have a history in Kemet. And 1 + 1 is 2. Serer and Jola, that's like two brother tribes, and Jola claim to come from the Great Lakes, and I figure Jola and Serer, the two brother tribes, descended down the Nile and ended up in Kemet. I figure, but yeah, we've been chased into the continent from the what's now called the Middle East, and of course the Iberian Peninsula, and I landed in Senegal. I landed near the capital of the province, Casamance. The locals say Casa di Mansa, the house of the king. But anyway, the capital of the province is called Ziguinchor, and that's to the contrary of them saying we bastardized their language. The French bastardized the language, and the city is now called Ziguinchor. But yeah, locals say, and it's also in Wikipedia, but it's probably Yorugu that wrote it. But it used to be called Ischiga Noschora, and that's in my language. And yeah, I I got a long story. That's maybe for another subject. Maybe when language is a subject or whatever. But they say it's the oldest Portuguese fortification or fort or whatever, and is Chiga nos Chora actually means they came, we cried. So yeah, it's a quite early Portuguese settlement, and he Kemjivers touched the early days of slavery and mentioned the island of Goree, and yeah, I believe there's a lot of people came from that region. For example, I believe, and that's a language connection. I believe people from Haiti come from that region. uh, um, uh, Seneca village had a Senegalese connection, right? The banjo is an instrument from the Jola. So yeah, I loved this video. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff he digs into that are rarely touched, and that's what I love about Chemtraverse. It's yeah. What can I say? Great video. Not to hijack the show, but I could go on for days. Great video.
Yeah, quick question to everyone, panel and chat. Did the speeding it up take anything away from its what's the word I'm trying to find? From your abilities to understand it, or was it clear enough for everyone?
I actually forgot. I actually forgot that it was sped up.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Because, sometimes County puts up some of his videos, but they're 40 minutes an hour and all kind of stuff, so it's hard to put them up sometimes.
Oh, may I add? May I add something? May I add something? I
Yeah, go
uh,
ahead.
I did a DNA. I did a DNA. My heritage or whatever. I forgot. I don't care. And out of it came how do they call it? Mesoamerica, and like from Mexico along the western coast of South America, almost to the southern tip of Chile. I got a DNA connection there. So today or yesterday, I was joking on I'm wilding out on Twitter. But anyway, I joked about my royal bloodline reaching out, reaching to the Americas. So yeah, that's another factor. Yeah, I mean, make of it what you want, but I'm gonna stick to my royal blood. Mansa Musa's nephew or whatever. What was it?
Yeah, Mansa Musa, who Tariq Nasheed said became Montezuma. Yeah, but thanks for that, Jose. Stick around if you can. Still waiting for Anthony to try to come back up. But I guess this thing is giving him problems. I don't know why that is. For you guys on the panel, is the interface when you join as a guest, is it difficult to navigate? Yes, no.
You
I mean,
asked me.
right. I mean, the only thing is that you need Google Chrome, but they kind of tell you you need Google Chrome, so I don't think that's Anthony's problem. But yeah, you just sign
Okay.
on. Yeah, that's it. It's pretty cool.
Okay. Okay. Any last thought? Well, any other thoughts on this prompt? All right. Well, we're gonna make good time, real good time tonight. Should be topic number 4 then.